David Goss, Tom Scoops, and Sir Minty here at SoccerWise. We are talking Charlotte FC for the 2025 MLS season. It has been an electric start to their time in MLS. The crowd atmosphere year one, then it started to come together on the field after that. And now the biggest expectations this year, Tom and Sir Minty, he's right there holding the gun, telling you to say it.
He's right there in my heart always. That's what it is. So I can't believe this is a big miss for me that I didn't go grab my Sir Minty button up that I have. Yes, that's a real thing that I have because I missed. I think that they did it for a giveaway at a game, and obviously one fell off the truck for me. You know what I'm saying?
You will be in the building, right? You are excited. You're going to get down to Charlotte.
Home opener. I can't wait. Charlotte is such a fun city, man. I was there for their inaugural home game. It was incredible. This is a super fun atmosphere when they get big games, and this is going to be a big game. It'll be the home debut for Wilfried Zaha, the team that had their best finish ever in 2024. They return all of the good parts about that team from last year, and guess what? They get to add Wilfried Zaha. Patrick Ajamong, they don't have to worry about. They didn't buy another DP forward to block him. He's going to be the starting center forward. Liel Abada gets a full offseason to really settle in and hit the ground running in year two. That's Again, two of those three players were there last year, and Pep Biel, the fourth here, who came late, and he's back with a full preseason. Three of those four players were here, and in each of those cases, you could say why this is going to be like a fresh start for all three, whether it's just more playing time or a full preseason, or again, Wilfried Zaha is going to take up a lot of focus for defensive units, and these three players I think are going to benefit a lot.
I was also at Charlotte's first ever game. I went for fun on my own. I sat in the upper deck. I don't remember a ton of it in a positive way. It wasn't
much to remember on the field.
Yeah, it was really, really fun. I do remember, was it Efra's goal, right?
Yeah, Efra had a banger. They lost, but my takeaway walking away from that wasn't, oh man, Charlotte lost. It was like, oh my God, that was so much fun.
No, you walk from that little cobblestone street that has the big soccer bar on it. You walk to the stadium. You've got the city in the background. Then you come out of the stadium and they've got pupusas and tacos and all that stuff going on. It was like my elite experience. I have really enjoyed watching this team from afar since then. If you're watching on video, you can see my thumbs up as a part of that. I've enjoyed watching it from afar. This feels like a big year, right? This is the jump. It is, okay, fine. Things were unstable over the first few years. You've got big name returning coach, like you just talked about, big name returning players. You've got an identity. You've got a spine. Can you get to that next level? Atlanta has re-upped things. Miami are going to be good. Nashville feels like they're coming back into the flow. There are a lot of teams around you that you will have meaningful games against. Can you show that you can be in the conversation towards the top? Patrick Ajamon, of course, the best player in the league, so that is huge expectations for him. And you forgot Eric Williamson, another friend of the show, even though he doesn't know we exist. We are excited to cheer for him. We're excited to root for him this year and hope that he gets back to things. So we were lucky enough to chat with TopBin90 and do a little preview with them. So let's go to that right now. All right. Well, you know the vibes, CTL. It is one of these stories of 2025. We cannot wait to see this season get kicked off for Charlotte FC. And there's no one better to talk about it with than Jorge Gonzalez, TopBin90. You guys are everywhere covering Charlotte soccer and soccer in general. We're excited to be together, and welcome on.
David, thank you so much for having us on. I'm excited to be here as well. We're in the Queen City, and we got a king of MLS like yourself on, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, wow. Too much compliments. It might break the internet. We might end up losing each other for service at some point with so much compliments, but I appreciate that. I'm excited. We did my MLS Today show a long time ago together when things were not as rosy at times for Charlotte FC. It's a different year. Just give me a feel of the vibes in the market going into the beginning of the season.
Nice. I think out of all the years that Charlotte's been in existence, this is the most exciting one in terms of the potential of what the club can do, right? So one of the things that, Charlotte has been notorious for the last 18 months is not being able to get a star quality player here, and we've got that in Wilfried Zaha, right? And so I think you compare going into last season versus this season, it's kind of night and day. Swiderski went out the last day of the European
Right.
transfer window, right? We had one DP in Enzo Copetti starting off the season, who's not even here anymore, right? And this year we're starting off with a Pep Biel who came back. We're starting off with Wilfred Zaha as our big signing. Liel Abada will have a preseason under him as well. So I mean, it's exciting. Patrick Ajiman is becoming a star, right? So it's a very exciting time for all of Charlotte FC fans.
It is wild that this is just the fourth season in Charlotte FC history. It feels like there's been 36 different seasons. In those 3 seasons, you went from a first-time head coach to firing that head coach. You talk about DPs going in and coming out. I mean, Karol Swiderski has made more moves by himself over the last 3 years than some teams make in a full transfer window, going on loan, coming back, going on loan, coming back, and finally transferred out. And yet, like you said, there is not maybe more excitement than this off season. Year one, it was about the club, the fans, the atmosphere. Like, that was built, that was put in place. Year two, it was up and down where it thought it was going to go in the right direction. And then year three, it felt like the rebuild began under Dino Smith. And now we're getting all the way into it. You did the transfer update for us that we like to do at the beginning of each show. Wilfred Zaha, brought in on loan. Pep Biel, brought back, but not as a DP this time. And then one of my personal favorites, Eric Williamson, who I absolutely love watching when he's at his peak, when he's healthy, when he's fit, out on the field. Let's talk about each of these moves individually because they are so big. Let's start with Zaha. You said it. It has been this chase for unnamed superstar winger, unnamed superstar creator. What was it like when Zaha finally got over the line?
I think it was exciting once we saw the pictures of him, Charlotte FC official, because we kind of had this with Calvin Stangs 6 months ago, where it felt like everything was done, but it wasn't truly done until Charlotte actually posted about it, right? So when we saw those pictures, everybody kind of had like a little sigh of relief, like, okay, it's done, right? And then second is just the excitement, the level of excitement, because what Charlotte has been missing ever since its beginnings, right, is kind of a talisman player that can put this team on their back, and when we're in tight situations or it's a 0-0, can create some sort of magic. And that's what we're expecting Zaha to be for Charlotte FC. We've already have a good squad built, but now we need a player of that caliber to be a difference maker, and that's what we think Zaha can be for this team. And to be fair to him, he did that at Crystal Palace, right? And so his last 2 moves weren't the greatest, right, in Lyon and in Galatasaray. But one of the things that reassured me that this was a good move was Dean actually spent time with him and had dinner with him before he signed him to try to make sure that that mentality was there coming into this squad. So that made me feel safe about this move and also excited.
And the other thing I think for me from the outside that makes me feel more comfortable about it is the other moves and the fact that while you're looking for that talisman, Pep Biel was on a DP contract last year, and now he comes back as not one. So you are basically going into this season with, however you consider Patrick Ajiman, 4 or 5 DP level players on this roster, which means Zaha can get the time to settle in and find his space in this group.
100%. And I like that you mentioned Eric Williamson, because I don't think that's a player that a lot of Charlotte FC fans know of, have heard of as much, right? And I think he's perfect for what we're trying to accomplish here, kind of have a box-to-box 8, a ball progressor, right? So that's something that I think he will fit perfectly into Dean's system.
Yeah, we haven't seen Williamson healthy for a while. When he was borderline national team. He's a game breaker in that midfield position. He can dribble by his players. He can open up the game with his passing. He is a buy low, sell high right now, right? They didn't give up much to get him, but his potential is absolutely massive. Let's talk about the outs before we move on with this team. The big one, Karol Swiderski finally transferred out from this team. A few other players who have been around for a while, Junior Urso, Jalen Lindsay, Hamadi Diop finally taken in the expansion draft, and Unanen. But I want to ask about Swiderski. Like, what will his legacy be in the end as the first DP and, scored the first goal, had some big moments, but then had this muddled 3-year experience?
Yeah, I think his legacy is dependent on who you ask at Charlotte, right? I feel like the fan base is 50-50 on him. There's the camp that believed, he had over 40 goal contributions in 75, 76 games. So he was productive enough, right? I just don't ever think he had, a partner that
Mm.
can, actually be able to feed him more balls or be able to be that other guy with him. And Soderski was never that number one guy, right? And so I think him expressing his desire to leave to Europe and actually getting that move and then coming back left a little bit of a sour taste in a lot of the fans' mouth. And, because of that, I think his legacy is, when you talk to some Charlotte fans, he is remembered as a Charlotte legend for coming into this
Mm.
club. Some others think he did okay while he's here. So I think it's a 50-50.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it sort of goes, I think, with everyone you talk with. I'm someone who has said what you sort of mentioned of he was brought in for the wrong role. He's a finisher, and he was brought in, and all of a sudden there was no creator. So he was asked to be a creator, and then he was asked to be more maybe than he was, and so he sort of tapped out and never really got the full opportunity to, I think, be the player he should have been. But I can understand for fans, you look at someone and say, well, you gave up on us and you sort of tried to push your way out. And I think his legacy will probably shift as time goes on and maybe it becomes a little less raw. And maybe if this team starts to win and it all hits, then it'll be a little bit fonder as someone who was in those lean years before it all gets together. For this club, 2 cup competitions this year. So US Open Cup for Charlotte, as well as Leagues Cup, which we now have the schedule for. They are the 18 seed. I have zero idea what that means. They will host Juarez, Chivas, and Monterrey, which are some massive clubs
Yeah.
at the bank. This is kind of going to be a fun little run for a week and a half in the summer.
It will. I mean, we obviously benefit from all those games being at Bank of America, right? So that's a plus. But we saw it last year with Cruz Azul, right? I mean, these teams are not easy teams, right? Especially like when you're looking at a team like Monterrey, who typically spends a lot, right? I mean, they just got Sergio Ramos coming in, right? So obviously, I feel like that's more of a PR move, but that's for another conversation. But I do like the teams that we're against, right? So I think Charlotte can hold its own, and plus having that upside of being at the bank, right? So anytime we play at home, I think this team has a
Yeah.
chance with anybody, and I like that. You touched on it a little bit. One thing that we know has been consistent and will continue to be consistent is this fan base. Second highest attendance in the league. We average over 30,000 people, and when it's rocking, it is rocking, and it can be a good 12th man for Charlotte FC.
Yeah, it is going to be a lot of fun. I think we have seen Charlotte FC, I think, has helped establish, not that it wasn't there, that Charlotte's a soccer market, but I think Charlotte FC being a touch point has brought in a lot of these Copa America games and European friendlies and all of that, and they consistently have huge crowds. Monterrey is one of those teams. Chivas is the biggest
Yep.
name you could argue out of Mexico. So I would assume those stadiums are going to be filled for those games. I think it's going to be bouncing. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, but I think it's completely reasonable to believe that if Charlotte puts their best 11 out there and is healthy, that they can contend with some of those teams. And then because of the Leagues Cup now, it doesn't even matter because then you go into a standings versus the other MLS teams
Yeah.
who played the other teams. That stuff is all the chaos in there, and we'll dig into that more as we get a little bit closer. Let's get Doyle's thoughts on this team, and then we'll talk about what we think this season could be.
Yeah, Charlotte went big on one move this offseason in getting Wilfred Zaha, which is the type of move that you want to see a team who's close actually go out and make. It was really ambitious, and he obviously fits the game model of Dean Smith. Zaha has been one of the most dynamic players in the open field for the past dozen years or so, and there's no reason to think that that won't translate at a high level to MLS immediately. The big question, well, two big questions with this team. Are they going to trust Pat Ajiman to be the number 9 from the jump and throughout the whole season? I think they will. It seems like Zoran Krneta, the CSO, has a lot of belief in Big Pat. I certainly do as well. The other one is, are they going to play Pep BL centrally as a number 10 in a 4-2-3-1? Or are they going to shunt him out wide to be sort of a playmaking inverted winger and just get another piano carrier into that central midfield? Because That's what we saw from Dean Smith last year. Even when they got Pep Biel in mid-season, he tried him as a 10 like 2 games, and he was like, nope, we want to have more field coverage and ball winning in central midfield. So it was Ashley Westwood deep, and then two guys who were just running around, Bronico, and sort of a rotation at the other position, running around, trying to stop transition moments, trying to create turnovers so that Charlotte could get out in transition moments. The reason I think it's important for them to figure out how to play BL centrally is because that allows them to be dangerous in multiple phases of play. And the real ceiling on this team is that they're really only good in transition so far. If they could get a true 10 out there who could help turn possession and final third sort of attacking movements into penetration, chances, and goals, this is a team that can do some damage and maybe even win a trophy.
So big words there from Doyle, big expectations and question marks. He focused obviously on Pep Biel, sort of his setup, sort of as a way to look at how this group is set up. What do you make of that, and what's sort of your expectations?
Yeah, I think he hit it on the money with Pep Biel, right? I personally think that we'll see him more in that 10 role this season versus out wide, simply because both Ashley Westwood and Dean Smith in their press conferences mentioned that one of the things that they want to work on a lot this season is holding more possession, right? So most of the season when we were doing well, most of those games we weren't holding a lot of possession.
Yeah.
And like Doyle said, there's a lot of us attacking in transition, right? So I think him being able to be that key guy in the midfield is going to be important for us and also important for him because let's not forget his contract is that loan option is done till August. So we still have more of an MLS season after that. So he's playing again for a longer extension here at Charlotte.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to start the year and say, like, can we be this team? Can we have all these attacking pieces on the field? Then if you find that's not the case, then you scale back from there. And I think if that's the case, there's also a conversation, which is, has Leo Labata won the spot? And then is it a rotation across the front three? And that goes back into Patrick Agyemang, who's going to get the chance first at the center forward position. But some of these other players then are going to become false nine options if it doesn't work out. My expectation is it'll work out. I'm a big fan of Mr. Patrick Agyemang. Let's talk about him for a second. What have you seen from him as he's grown? Obviously, he blew up in the national spotlight with the national team goals, but we've seen him for Crown Legacy. We've seen him for Charlotte FC, Open Cups, Leagues Cup, and in MLS. Like, it's been growing and growing. What's been your experience sort of watching it?
Yeah, honestly, it's been exciting, at least like covering the team, seeing somebody go from a draft pick now to making a U.S. men's national team camp, right? I think for what Patrick Agyemang is, like his potential, there's still more to see from him, right? I mean, let's not forget he beat out not one but two DP9s at Charlotte FC. He beat out Enzo Copetti and he beat out Karol Swiderski, right? And also, one of the things that we saw him progress in his game last year was, one, his decision making, and two, his ability to create his own chances, right? So in a less talented squad last year, he was able to get double-digit goals, right? So this season, with, Pep Biel, with Abada, with Zaha, with Williamson, there's more opportunities for Pat to stack up those goals, right? So I'm really excited to see what he can do for us this season, right? And, I really loved his comments right after the second game with the U.S. men's national team, where he kind of has that hunger now to be back. So he's coming into Charlotte very motivated, arguably the best squad Charlotte's ever put together, and he's going to be the leading nine. So now he just has to walk into that, right? Has to be able to deliver that 15, 20 goals this season.
Tom said that he's talked to him briefly, I think, out at Coachella at the preseason. And when he brought up Zaha, he sort of asked the question of, like, what do you make of Wilfried Zaha? Thinking he was asking, like, how excited are you to be around him and play with him and talk to him? And immediately his answer was like, yeah, he'll open up space for me. Like, knowing exactly what he can be on the field, not being overawed by a Premier League veteran and, national team player, someone who's played in an AFCON final, like all those big things, not to be overawed by that. And that's one of the things I love about what this player is and what Patrick Agyemang's like. And I think the expectation should be very high. We're going to talk Zaha specifically when we get to Weebies. over under. But I want to talk about the team because Doyle finished and brought up a trophy. Last year, Charlotte finished 5th in the Eastern Conference. The feeling of confidence at this point in preseason, I think, gives you a little like, well, we expect more. They are returning the 5th most minutes from last year as well. So there's continuity. There's a big addition. There's a lot of confidence. There's a huge fan base. What should the expectations be this year?
I think the expectations, they've already set them for themselves as well, is, finishing off the MLS season in a top 4 position, right? So that's first and foremost. I think they felt that going out against Orlando last minute in those penalty shootouts as well, that they were 1 point behind them, and they felt like if that game was at the bank, it could have been a totally different thing, right? So I think that's one. And I think there's a high chance of potentially, making a final in a tournament like the U.S. Open Cup, where there's a limited amount of MLS teams, and I think only 2 or 3 teams finished higher than Charlotte FC last season during regular MLS season, right? So there's opportunities. And so I think that's the expectation. One, because Dean has solidified this team, right? The number one concern last year was the amount of goals that we were conceding. Last year, we finished 2nd behind Seattle in goals conceded. So that's great, right? So it's improving in possession, and I think it's the ceiling of a Zaha and the ceiling of a Patrick Agyemang or even a Liel Abada that could really determine if Charlotte can crack into a top 3 this season, right? I'm saying that more because seeing moves like Columbus where, they just lost their most important asset in Gucho, right? Obviously Cincy has some things going on with Acosta going, but they're getting a Vander who's, if not as good, even better, right? So I think Charlotte has an opportunity to break that ceiling, and I think a top 4 finish wouldn't be out of this realm, and I think finishing top 3 is a potential.
Yeah, I think the top 4 conversation is a good one of they should be a tick better than they were last year. As you said, it's kind of chaotic in the teams that have dropped below, but maybe other teams that have jumped above. And while Charlotte hasn't stayed consistent, we're talking about Wilfried Zaha coming in. Like, they've taken a step as well. I think it's going to take a little time to see how big of a step. And I think across the 3 cup competitions, it's fair to say, can you push for a final in one? The Open Cup is one that I've talked about around a couple other teams. Nashville brought it up as like, is that one we could compete in? I think this Charlotte team has the depth to do it because we are talking about multiple attacking pieces that can all start. I like the idea that Tim Ream's going to start probably at left back, but can be a center back. So you've got multiple options in those spots, and Williamson as well. Maybe not a starter. So as though, you look at 4 or 5 players who can step in for an Open Cup game, and then all of a sudden you're 2 wins in and you're in a quarterfinal, and you now start to take it very seriously and say, what can we do? And Charlotte has a fun one because there are so many local clubs that you can get a Charlotte Independence or get a game against another North Carolina team. And I think that gives it a little bit more edge that allows them to focus for it, as well as the success they've had with Crown Legacy and the depth of the club, even with the new club not having the academy fully fleshed out yet going into this year. Let's dig into our line here because it's going to affect a lot of, I think, how we see this year going. And Andrew Wiebe sets it for Wilfried Zaha. This is goals plus assists in MLS competitions only. And he put the line at 21.5 and the over-under there. So what do you make of this line and where do you fall?
Yeah, I'm right there with him, actually. Right, because I don't think we're going to see a Wilfried Zaha that's just going to blow the league into another level. But I think he's going to come in and contribute, right? And so that's the most important thing, I think, if he's able to have that 20-plus GA, right? And so I think he's right on the money with that as well. So I think it may take a couple of games for Zaha to get comfortable, but once he's in his groove, I think he could be that player for us. And there's other things that I guess we don't see that make me believe that he will have a good season. One, I think one of the things that, Zoran and other people in the club have mentioned is that they knew that this player, that there was somebody there that just needed somewhere to be comfortable and feel like himself again. And Charlotte does a great job of every time a new player comes in, they kind of incorporate them into that family aspect of what Charlotte FC wants to be. So I think that for Zaha is going to be very important. And I think expecting him to have 20 goals and assists in a season is right on the money, especially for this first season.
I think I like what you said there about sort of the environment for him. Because one, what we've heard from him is like he just wants to enjoy the game again. He wants to get an opportunity. He will get that. Having a coach in Dean Smith who comes from the same background gives you, his best years you've mentioned were Crystal Palace. Dean Smith, not at Crystal Palace, but in a very similar setup in the Premier League, knows what the expectations should be, how to handle a player like that. And then you have a multicultural team with people who are from similar backgrounds to him that he can fit into. There is responsibility on his shoulders, which I think is a good thing for him to feel that. But also, like I said, that support for him. I think this line is good. I'm going to go slightly under. I think 10-10 would be a phenomenal year. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's where he ends up. And you're stoked that he had, he was able to fit in and be comfortable and contribute to the team both as a goal scorer as well as a creator, but maybe not have as many consistent games year one where he's able to put up numbers like that. So I'm going to go slightly under on that number, but I still think it can be a really good year for him and for the club. And I hope to be around at some point. I absolutely love Charlotte games. They are must watch on television. They must attend if you can get into the area. Me and Tom talked about it. I know Tom's going to get down there for sure. Jorge, enjoy it. Enjoy Pepas and everything else that's going on. And let's stay in touch.
For sure. David, thanks so much. Tom's coming. You and Tom are very, very liked and respected and loved in the Charlotte fan base, man. So anytime we get to see you guys here, when you get a chance, make sure you come out. So thanks again for taking the time.